Welcome to Resilience plus Rise, the podcast where resilience is not just a concept but a lived experience. I'm your host, Thomas Carrier, a resilience coach, a ultramarathoner, and a relentless believer in the human spirit's ability to rise. This podcast is a companion to my book, Resilience Plus Rise 26.2 Transformative Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life Mindset. Each podcast episode is a raw, unfiltered dive into the stories those who have faced life's hardest challenges and emerged stronger. Today's guest, I'm so excited
Mhm.
to reinvite David C. Olcott, the president of Samurai Success. I had the privilege of reading his book, The Swords of Illumination, just a few months back. And what a journey! What a journey! Have a look onto it. It's available on Amazon, etc., and most of the other channels about platforms. David is also a seasoned executive coach. He's an NLP master, a martial artist, and of course, a best-selling author. His passion lies in helping people and businesses achieve success to fulfill their destiny. Here, let's hinge on the word destiny because that's what he believes that there is a path towards everybody drives towards their destiny. Sometimes we get lost in finding out where the destiny is. Let's get into this conversation and find or talk to David about how he found his destiny and what his suggestions are for all the listeners about if when they've got the destiny, how to work towards it and the journey of life. David, welcome back to Resilience Plus Rise.
Thomas, I'm so thrilled to be here, man. And by the way, first things first, an immense level of gratitude. I have not read your book yet. It's on my list. Right now, I'm writing book two, so we're kind of sequestered from reading any material. But just huge congrats, man. I know that journey. I know what it takes. Huge blessings to you, man, for getting your thoughts out to the world. And I know it's going to change things. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That was what a beautiful way to start. Thank you so very much. So, David, for people who know you, your stories would have been known, and people who have gone through my initial podcast, for them also they would have known a little about you. But to the new listeners, and maybe again, let's go back to who David is now and what was the journey.
So we talked about in our last podcast a lot of the details, but a journey of just true understanding about how I work as a human being, how this physical plane works, and then how the spiritual dimension helps serve that. And this has
Okay.
been my quest. This has been my chosen destiny, if you will. And that's something I definitely know that you and I want to talk about. Part of this conversation that we're going to have today has a lot to deal with discerning between words. And words, as you know, beautiful man, matter. So
Yes.
there, there is this term called destiny that we use a lot, and we tend to confuse it with another word called fate. These are
Okay.
very different words, and I really want to be dramatic here so that because this was a powerful understanding in my life. Fate has this promise, like you're going to end up there. Destiny does not have that same promise. Like one particular destiny is going to show up, or you're going to end up there. So by confusing those two words, we think by working really hard and putting a lot of energy and effort and all these things we've been taught and all the rules to play by, we're going to end up in a place of fate, also known as destiny.
Hmm.
I'd like to be able to give you a different discernment, a different definition of what I've experienced this lifetime, which means destiny is somewhere you end up. And for most of us, it isn't a choice of ending up there. Fate is something like it's predestined, right? You're going to end up there. I will tell you that through my experience, that kind of guarantees isn't what I understand about the universe. The universe doesn't provide guarantees, it provides opportunities. And because of that opportunity, you are definitely going to reach a destiny, but it doesn't mean that destiny is your fate. Those are distinguishable things to really contemplate. And believe me, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, having
Of course.
conversations with some very high powered people to come to this understanding. You are going to end up somewhere, Thomas. It just may not be where you thought you would end up. Would you like to change that?
Fantastic. Actually, this resonates to a statement that I say time and again is that in this X billion number of people in this world, as we know as Earth, a lot of people have got choice. A lot
Mhm.
of them, they exist through their life and they reach as per what they believe. Oh, this is my fate. This is what has happened. But there are people who live their life, who make a choice to make a difference to their daily existence. And that's what how they take on the destiny.
Well said, man. Well said.
And but what got my attention was you had a background in being a very successful entrepreneur in real estate and a lot of sports activities, etc. What made you change your destiny in continuing in that trajectory towards that faith of retiring comfortably in a well professed name in the in the real estate market and moving into something which is absolutely into the realms of spiritualism and metaphysical.
So, as we talked about before, I was down in South Beach selling real estate to most of the celebrities that were down. I mean, during that time, this is 35 years ago, real estate was booming. I was literally selling property on a yacht, and we were taking people around to all these celebrities, Sylvester Stallone, Madonna, Prince, shaking hands with their staff and meeting them and showing them these amazing properties that they were buying from the gentleman I was working with, who became the number one selling real estate agent in the world. So I'm driving this 560 SL Mercedes. I'm living on South Beach. I live in a $3.5 million home. All this stuff should have been making me happy. And Thomas, it was probably the most depressing time in my life because here's the thing. I was what I thought living success on the outside.
Hmm.
I was really depressed on the inside. And this is where most of us end up is we're actually living someone else's life. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I've had a sense, I don't know why this is true for me, but I've had a sense that I've been here before. I don't know why. I know that sounds crazy, but I was like, I'm not going to do this again. I want to do something different. I know my soul was talking to me and going, hey, there's another game to play here. There's another way to approach this. And I just didn't know what it is because I'd been taught and practiced and I was really good at it, Thomas. I mean, really good at this business side, really good at being an entrepreneur. I've been it since I was 12 years old, selling lobster, from different restaurants and all these things. I knew the game so well because I'd practiced it. And yet I was hollow inside. I was not happy. So that's what that pain and suffering is what caused me to go, I've got to look for something alternative. I got to look for something different. And that's what put me on my soul's journey of finding this different game.
Okay, that's incredible because again, everybody has got a choice
Mm.
and it's on what you want to take up. I can totally empathize with a part of your journey because I was working, being successful, getting the monetary benefits of my regular 8 to 4 type of a job, and but I never knew that was really fulfilling me. And the call was always about getting this book out to the audience, and that's what I said. That when my contract was about to be renewed, I said thank you, but no thank you, and I walked away from it. I had to just work on it. And yes, the growth that we observe during that journey is absolutely different, what nothing could really fulfill. So, David, in your journey, when you got into the soul seeking or the vibrations within, what got you into the spiritual aspects of it and knowing that there is something more to life than just existing?
So my journey really started off in the seminar world, where I started going after reading books and then going and seeing the authors of that, speaking opportunities. And one of those books, Brian, Many Lives, Many Masters,
Yes.
went to his seminar, right, kind of stuff, and just really, and it opened my mind to something that really resonated, but yet opened me to something I had not heard before. And I was fascinated by that. I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I've been learning about people and people's behavior, but what's this other aspect? What's this soulful, spiritual energy that we're working with, and how do we use it? How does it use us? I got really curious about finding that. And again, one of those great scriptures that says, "Ask and you shall receive." Well, my very next book was something called A Conversation with God by Neil Donald
Need
Walsh.
Walsh.
Yeah. Oh, Thomas, I'm going to be a little bit explicit here, but I was literally living in this commercial apartment because I was traveling around the world with Tony Robbins, and I was sitting there. I remember it. I was sitting in my bed, cross-legged, reading this book. I had, I had my underwear on, and I was crying profusely because all this tension that I had in my life was just coming out of me. I just was releasing because I was reading something that resonated so powerfully with me that it spoke a truth to me that I had never given myself permission to feel, or I hadn't experienced before. It was that powerful. And I knew when I wanted to be able to write a book, I wanted to have a similar experience when I read this book that I wrote that channeled through me, much like Neil had channeled the information through him. I wanted to figure out how to connect with spiritual energy to bring forth amazing creative energy, new ideas that resonated with me in such a powerful way that I knew it was a truth that I could use. So
Hmm.
that journey really allowed me to explore that new pathway to solving problems, solving ideas, not using my ego anymore to solve those, where your mind just works overtime and you're chunking things down and you're, figuring out this and what strategy and what leverage am I going to do? Was there a different way? And that's pathway of being able to solve problems, which as human beings, we do all the time. I
Hmm.
wanted to have access to a different source so that I could really feel the long-term effects of that as opposed to the short-term benefits that I was getting from my ego as a source. So that was the fascinating pathway for me.
Wonderful. Actually, this gets me to the next point, is that when you mentioned about conversations with God, which I have read all the 4 or 5 books of his, and it's just a wonderful journey. Also, I complimented that with Return to Love by
Mm.
Marianne Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
And that too also was a very, very uplifting, and it stirs. But the question over here is that just a while back you mentioned about spiritual words, ask and you shall receive. In today's world, wherein it's kind of divided by people who go by the scriptures or the holy book, okay, they do not follow it, that's a different story. And your belief that there is a soul, there is a spirit. Of course, the question would be, what is the difference between a soul and a spirit? But the question what I want to put over here at the key point which comes to my mind is that for people who say that the holy book, irrespective of whose holy book it is,
Mm.
whether it is the Christians or the Jews or the Hindus or the Buddhists, etc., there is a holy book. There is a book of spiritualism. There is a book for guidance. There is a book of how life should be adhered to. How different it is to your belief, or how conjoined are those from what you believe in and what those books are.
So and that's the part I'm fascinated with, is not the content within each one of those manuals for life, if you will, these
Mhm.
Bibles, there's these spiritual guides, if you will. I'm fascinated by the truly things that I find about the masters who I've listened to. They've always spoken in parables.
Hmm.
And that fascinating. But why isn't it like, why when I read a business book, it says, "Hey David, you do this and then you're going to get this result." Why wasn't our spiritual manuals doing the same thing? Why weren't they telling us what to do? Now that's my interpretation of those books. And it was really fascinating to really understand, because the masters want us to be able to interpret each
True.
one of those manuals. It's our ability as a human being, our God-given gift, to be able to create meanings with things. And so once you see whatever someone's telling you about how you should think about that particular manual or that particular source, then they're violating the very nature of free will.
True.
Free will gives us really access to choices. And that's what we've been talking about so far, is that real choice point. And it's fascinating to say, well, what's the structure that supports that? And that's where I love to get to, not the content of it, and which scripture makes sense and how we should live and all that. That's an individual choice from my perspective. So we have all these different interpretations, yet there's a collective consciousness that allows us to really support each other in that cooperative nature. Okay, so what's the underlying basis and structure of that is where I love to get to. And the fascinating part about it is that every single one of those sets of books gives you, the reader, the opportunity to create a set of beliefs and values for you personally to be able to go live and do and apply actions in this physical realm. And that's what's so beautiful about the work, is they're not telling you this is the principle you have to follow. That's our interpretation of what is written, not what the book, I believe, has intended to do. And so we've gotten a little confused with that.
Mm-hmm.
The second part of that is reading this or understanding this difference between spirit and soul, and then getting down to the mind and the body, and kind of this collective experience, this avatar, if you will, that we get to in this physical plane. So my understanding is that the spirit is kind of like the ocean of energy. The soul is an individual wave within that ocean. And then, of course, the body, the unique ego that goes along with that, is kind of like saying, hey, I'm a pebble on the entire beach. So they're all connected, yet they're uniquely elements of divinity. And because of that, right, we have limited access to the full power of it. And that's kind of the basics that I understand is why we can come here and actually do what we've come here to do from a soul perspective, which is experience that which we say we are. Because in the other
True.
realm, we can't do that. Here, we have all these different laws and natural things that go along with Newtonian concepts, if you will, that allow us to truly do the one thing we've come here to do as a soul, which is experience that which we say we are.
Fantastic. Actually, when you mentioned both the scriptures as well as your initial story about you were living successfully based on the symbols and the, what do you call it, as the nameplates as put by the world, Newtonian world, that you had all those particular earmarks of being successful, but you never found it a sense of peace. And of course, the scripture says the kingdom is always within. And it goes further to say, seek first the kingdom within, and all the rest will be given to you. And we tend to always go out because we are so glamored or put across by what the world is, and we just live in that particular element. Coming to the next point is that yes, you are still on a journey of exploring further and going more and
Very
living the life. It is always, because I always believe is that the day you stop living or the day you stop learning is the day you stop living. So that's the way I look at it. But my question over here is that for the listeners who want to go deep within, of course, there is a lot of things out there. In today's world, you ask AI, that will give you around 10 to 15 pages of what you need to be doing. But in your experience, what are three or four key elements that would help a human to elevate themselves? I mean, of course, there are day-to-day requirements, day-to-day challenges, day-to-day strife. There, my bills need to be paid, my family needs to be taken care. I need help. I need to run away from a bomb. Sorry, it's maybe non-political, but it
right.
is. But for that, just the sense of being elevated, what would you suggest?
So two of those fundamental principles we talk a lot about in the book, which is really important, and you and I spoke about this before. I really wrote that book for me to be able to remind me of these principles, because one of the key concepts in this physical plane, there's this spiritual energy that masters have talked about called Maya energy. And
Yes.
in this physical plane, let's just imagine that we're swimming in this ocean of forgetfulness juice. That is what's called Maya energy. So we're constantly forgetting all these great concepts that we learn. The way to overcome that forgetfulness is actually moving from knowingness, which is knowledge, and applying that knowledge, which then leads into the experience. And Thomas, this is the huge breakthrough that is really talked about in the book, because just because you have knowledge doesn't mean that's power. What really creates power in this physical realm is your ability to apply that knowledge in a practical way that gives you an experience that you can repeat. And repeating is an element of what makes success possible. If you can't repeat something you've been successful at, you can't call it success. You can call it luck, but you can't call it. It has to be duplicatable. You have to be able to repeat it. So if you forget it, though, you're going to not be able to repeat it. So writing those things down. Second part is, you are not here to discover who you are. You're not here to uncover who you are. You're actually here for the opportunity to create who you are. And when you look at the successful people on the planet, that is a single characteristic that separates them from the rest of us experiencing something different. They don't look under a rock to be able to find out who they are. They're not thinking that God has already put together this thing that you have to go find this treasure and you have to uncover it. And then, David Olcott, this is what it says. And I just have to follow this map. This is a place of self-creation, not self-discovery. And that's a huge breakthrough in my life that really changed things. Because if you look at the celebrities that are on the planet, and you could name anyone, your favorite person that you love on the planet, they are in the act of self-creation. And then
Hmm.
they do the actions that support that identity. So this self-creation is called your identity. And then that's your beingness. And then the actions you take have to be congruent with that identity. So if I say I'm a world-class athlete and I sit on the couch over there and eat Cheetos, those two things don't go together to create the kind of result I'm after. So if I'm saying I'm a world-class athlete, then I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing my breakfast, I'm doing my carb counts, I'm doing all the things that go along with that. Those behaviors have to align with my identity. And when they don't, that inconsistency actually slows down the results you're after. The more congruent you are, it actually accelerates your ability to produce and manifest things in this physical realm.
Wonderful. And guys, if you'll have reached until here, I'll be putting out David's connections, social media information. To reach out to him if you are in that flux moment, or if you're in that particular moment about what next. And he's an amazing human. He is.
Can't wait to
So,
meet him.
which gets me to the next point is that what are the projects that you've been working on? I just heard about the next book, the next part two of Swords of Illumination, which is in the pipeline. What else is going on in your realm of rediscovery, recreation, and being who you are?
So the first book, of course, has been a remarkable success, which we're incredibly grateful for it. If you hadn't had the opportunity to read it, please go out there and read it, because there's some really wonderful information in there that people are coming back to us and sharing with us that we just didn't even have insights that people would look at it this way. So an amazing interpretation of what's going on in that work. And I think one of the really cool stories was a lady from South America who called. She goes, she had been to all these programs, all these seminars, the big dogs of all the programs, but she had forgotten that it wasn't just about getting knowledge. It was about applying the knowledge. And just
Mm-hmm.
that one concept just got her taking the information she already knew and she was actually applying it, which is exactly what that book is designed to do. Get you in the application phase, because the application phase leads you into the experience. Now, here's an interesting thing with people with big brains. Now, Thomas, you and I have big brains. So here's the problem with big brains. You and I can actually imagine a subject, a scenario, and we can imagine it with great details as if we're actually living it. and we can play the whole scenario out in our minds, and we can end up somewhere. And then based upon that mind game that we just played with ourselves, we
Mhm.
can imagine we've made a quality decision out of that.
True.
I will tell you, brother, that there's another pathway that truly explodes that concept by truly getting out of your brain and simply going in and applying in the experience, Thomas, is where all the secret sauce you've been looking for in your life exists. And if you play the mental game and you just go through that, you bypass that experiential level, you're never going to get the real answers that are going to satisfy who you say you are. You are actually bypassing the gifts and answers you're after by just playing it out in your mind. So going into the experience is what I've done over the last 25 years. I've put my talk into action. So every
Okay.
couple of years, man, I go out and I do these crazy things and I put myself into the learning curve. And I will tell you the expansion and evolution that comes from that process is remarkable.
Wow. That's amazing. Just being mindful of the time, David, is that if you have, you mentioned there was a lot, and guys, if you really listen to it, and I would request you to re-listen to what was just mentioned, because those are powerful. They can help you to break maybe some of the barriers that you believe is there. I see it as the carrot and stick. We forget that to we are always running in front of the carrot, but we forget the experience of just running, enjoying the process of running.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point of time, the carrot will come more towards us rather than we running towards the carrot. But being in that moment, savoring the experience, and giving that worth. So my question, one of my final questions over here, of course, I don't want to say a final question because there would be a lot more. But is that what do you suggest for those people who are in the realms that they want to do more?
So it's an interesting thing that there's this symbol behind me, this yin yang
Yin
symbol,
yang, okay?
right? And the purpose of that is to remind us here at Samurai Success that we live in a world of not this or that, which most of us are living and experiencing. That's got to be this way or it's got to be this way. So it's the coin flip in the Western society that says, hey, it's heads or it's tails,
Hmm.
right? Well, this 5,000-year-old symbol of the yin yang reminds us that both heads and tails are on the same side. So it reminds us it's not a or world, it's an and world, this and that. So let's talk about a pretty heavy concept called free will and this term called concept called programming.
Okay,
Free will is something you have access to.
of
Once
course.
you take your free will and choices and you place them in your programming, your subconscious programming, which most of us learn by every subject by the time we're 7 years old, Thomas, every single subject has already had predetermined response and reaction to those particular subjects. How much money you're going to make, how much you're going to be healthy, how much you're going to deal with love, or how much weight you're going to have, how long you're going to allow yourself to live. I know that sounds really big, but conditioned into us is in our subconscious programming. So we're under this impression that free will, which exists in the conscious part of your brain, is having the biggest impact on your events in your life. This is not accurate. We
Hmm.
now know from neuroscience that 95% of the events that you're manifesting in your life come from your subconscious programming.
True.
So if you really want to change things in your life, you can't learn something and talk about it all day long. It's never going to change your programming. Changing that programming is what changes these events out there. And that's is why we've been studying for the last 30 years about how to approach that in a really unique way so that we use your words, your voice, your feeling states, your behaviors, not someone else's, like me telling you what to do. We help you find that internal master inside of you, listen to that part of you, and design and create this identity so that you can put this into your subconscious and start experiencing that in a brand new way. That's how you make change, man.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much for that, David.